What would you do if you discovered your wife was having an affair with the man hired to protect your family? This is the story of Alexander Hayes, a billionaire CEO who trusted the wrong person. And when the FBI got involved, the truth that came out left everyone speechless. This is Alexander and Catherine's story, a tale of betrayal, espionage, and discovering that the real threat was inside their home all along. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know. Where are you watching from right now? City and country. It's amazing to see our Deep Stories community growing around the world. If you believe that trust can be tested in unimaginable ways, that families can survive betrayal, and that sometimes the person protecting you is the one you need protection from, hit that subscribe button. This is Alexander and Catherine Hayes' journey, a story about loyalty, deception, and learning that rebuilding is harder than breaking but worth every painful step. Let's begin. Alexander Hayes wasn't just wealthy. He was one of those men whose success seemed effortless. At 45, he had built Hayes Industries from the ground up, transforming a small tech startup into a billion-dollar empire. His face graced the covers of business magazines. His opinions shaped markets. His wealth opened every door. But money, as Alexander would soon discover, couldn't buy loyalty. His wife, Catherine Hayes, was 38 and stunning, the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went. They had met 12 years ago at a charity gala. She was an art curator then, passionate about bringing culture to underprivileged communities. He was a rising entrepreneur, hungry to prove himself. Their romance was the stuff of fairy tales. Within 6 months, they were engaged. Within a year, married. Within 2 years, they had a daughter, Emma, who was now 10 years old, and the light of Alexander's life. Catherine remembered their wedding day with painful clarity. Alexander had written his own vows. He had stood there in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, looking at her with eyes that held nothing but love and promise, and he had said, "I promise to always put you first, to never let work become more important than us, to build a life with you, not just a business empire." She had believed every word. The first 3 years of their marriage had been exactly what she had dreamed of. Alexander would come home for dinner every night. They would cook together, laughing as he inevitably burned something and she had to rescue their meal. They would sit on their small apartment balcony, back when money was still tight and the business was just getting started, drinking cheap wine and talking about their dreams. When Emma was born, Alexander had taken 2 full weeks off work. 2 weeks where he changed diapers and walked the floor at 3 in the morning when their daughter wouldn't sleep. 2 weeks where he looked at Catherine with such gratitude and love that she felt like the most important person in his world. "We made her," he would whisper, holding Emma close. "We made this perfect little human. How did we get this lucky?" Catherine would watch him with their daughter and feel her heart expand with a love so fierce it was almost painful. This was everything she wanted. This man, this child, this life they were building together. But somewhere around Emma's 3rd birthday, things began to shift. Hayes Industries secured its first major contract. Suddenly, Alexander was traveling more, working later, missing bedtime stories and weekend breakfasts. At first, Catherine understood. This was what they had been working toward. Financial security, a future for Emma that included the best schools and opportunities. "Just until we get established," Alexander would say, kissing her forehead before leaving for another business trip. "Once we're stable, I'll cut back." I promise. She believed him. She kept believing him through Emma's 4th birthday party, which Alexander missed because of an emergency meeting in San Francisco. Through their 7th wedding anniversary, which he forgot completely until his assistant called to remind him. Through countless school events where Emma would scan the audience looking for her father, her little face falling when she realized he wasn't there again. From the outside, the Hayes family were perfect. Mansion in the suburbs with a pool and elaborate gardens that Catherine had designed herself. Penthouse in the city that Alexander used more than their actual home. Vacation house in the Hamptons that they rarely visited together because Alexander was always too busy. Emma attended Westwood Academy, the finest private school in the state, where tuition cost more than most people's annual salary. Catherine sat on the boards of 3 major charities: organizing galas and fundraisers while maintaining the perfect image of the successful CEO's wife. Alexander's company continued to soar, winning contracts and expanding into new markets. His face appeared on the cover of Forbes, Business Insider, Fortune. He gave keynote speeches at tech conferences. He was invited to consult with government agencies on cybersecurity. But behind the closed doors of their beautiful home, Catherine was drowning in loneliness. She tried to talk to Alexander about it. Multiple times, she tried approaching it gently, suggesting maybe they could have date nights again, like they used to. She tried being direct, telling him she felt like she was raising Emma alone. She tried getting angry, accusing him of caring more about his company than his family. Each time, Alexander would look genuinely regretful. He would apologize, promise to do better, maybe even manage to be present for a few days before sliding back into his old patterns. Work was always urgent. Clients always needed him. The business always demanded just one more late night, one more weekend, one more missed family moment. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he said during one particularly heated argument when Emma was 7. "Do you know how many people depend on this company? How many families rely on the jobs we provide? I can't just stop working because you want me to watch a movie with you." Catherine had stared at him, feeling something cold settle in her chest. "I'm not asking you to stop working. I'm asking you to remember that you have a family, that your daughter is growing up without you, that your wife exists." "That's not fair," Alexander had replied, his voice sharp with frustration. "Everything I do is for this family. The house you live in, the school Emma attends, the lifestyle you enjoy, that all comes from the work I do." "I don't care about the house," Catherine had said quietly. "I care about you. Emma cares about you, but you're never here." "I'm building something," Alexander had said, and there was a note of desperation in his voice that Catherine hadn't heard before. "I'm creating a legacy, financial security, a future where Emma never has to worry about money or opportunity. Why can't you see that?" But Catherine did see it. She saw that Alexander had become so focused on providing that he had forgotten about being present. She saw that he measured his worth as a husband and father by the numbers in their bank account, rather than the moments he was missing. She saw that somewhere along the way, the man who had promised to always put her first had broken that promise so thoroughly that he didn't even realize he had done it. The loneliness became a constant companion. Catherine would wake up in their king-sized bed and reach for Alexander, only to find his side empty and cold. He had left for the office hours ago without saying goodbye. She would prepare elaborate dinners that went cold waiting for him to come home. She would practice conversations in her head, planning what she wanted to say to him, only to have him arrive home so exhausted and distracted that she couldn't bring herself to start another fight. Emma started asking questions that Catherine didn't know how to answer. Why? Doesn't Daddy ever come to my school events? Why is Daddy always on his phone when we're together? Does Daddy love his work more than us? Catherine would make excuses. Daddy was very important and very busy. Daddy was working hard to give them a good life. Daddy loved them very much. He just had a lot of responsibilities. But inside, she was asking herself the same questions Emma was asking. And she didn't like the answers she was finding. Alexander worked constantly. 18-hour days became normal. 20-hour days weren't uncommon. Weekends at the office were routine rather than exception. Business trips that took him away for weeks at a time happened almost monthly. He told himself he was building security for his family, creating a legacy for Emma. He genuinely believed that the sacrifices he was making today would pay off tomorrow, that eventually the business would run smoothly enough that he could step back and spend time with his family. But tomorrow kept moving further away. Catherine told herself the same things at first. This was temporary. This was the price of success. Other CEO wives managed, and so could she. Alexander was a good man working hard for their future. She should be grateful for everything he provided. But gratitude couldn't fill the empty seat at the dinner table. Gratitude couldn't teach Emma how to ride a bike or help her with math homework or tuck her in at night with the stories only her father could tell. Gratitude couldn't hold Catherine when she cried from frustration and loneliness. Gratitude couldn't make love to her or remind her that she was desirable and seen and valued. Loneliness has a way of reshaping priorities, of making you vulnerable to attention you would otherwise ignore, of creating spaces in your heart that you didn't know existed until someone else notices them and offers to fill them. 3 months ago, everything changed. Alexander received multiple death threats from a disgruntled former employee who had been fired for stealing proprietary information. The threats were specific and credible. They mentioned Emma by name. They described Catherine's daily routine in detail that proved this person had been watching them. For the first time in years, Alexander was genuinely frightened, not for himself, but for his family. The realization that his business decisions had put Catherine and Emma in danger shook him in a way that Catherine's complaints about his absence never had. David Chen, Alexander's head of security for 8 years, insisted on hiring personal protection, not just for Alexander, but for Catherine and Emma too. "I don't need a babysitter," Catherine had protested when Alexander told her. They were in his home office late at night, one of the rare occasions when they were both awake and in the same room at the same time. "It's not negotiable," Alexander replied, barely looking up from his laptop. He was reviewing a contract even as he discussed death threats against his family. "I won't risk your safety because of my business decisions." Catherine felt a flash of anger. "But you'll risk our marriage because of your business decisions?" Alexander finally looked up, confusion crossing his face. "What? Never mind," Catherine said quietly. "What was the point?" He wouldn't hear her anyway. He never did. "The bodyguard starts Monday," Alexander said, returning his attention to his laptop. "His name is Marcus Kane, former military, impeccable credentials. He'll drive you to your charity meetings and accompany Emma to and from school." "Fine," Catherine said, and left his office. She didn't know that this decision, made by her husband without really consulting her, would change everything. That the man hired to protect her would become the man who destroyed her marriage. That in trying to keep his family safe from external threats, Alexander had inadvertently invited the real danger inside their walls. That's how Marcus Kane entered their lives. Marcus was 32, former military, and exactly what you'd expect from an elite bodyguard. 6'3" of disciplined muscle, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from real danger, not boardroom posturing. He arrived at their home on a Monday morning driving a black SUV with tinted windows. He wore a dark suit that couldn't quite hide the weapon holstered at his hip. When Catherine opened the door, he extended his hand with professional courtesy. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Marcus Kane. I'll be handling your security detail." His handshake was firm and brief. His eyes were a striking hazel that seemed to take in everything about her in that single moment. Catherine felt oddly exposed, as if this stranger could see through the carefully maintained facade of the perfect CEO's wife to the lonely, invisible woman underneath. "Just Catherine is fine," she said, stepping back to let him inside. "Can I get you coffee? We have about 20 minutes before I need to leave for my meeting." "Coffee would be great, thank you." She led him to the kitchen and poured 2 cups, grateful for something to do with her hands. Marcus stood by the counter, not sitting even when she gestured to the bar stools, maintaining his professional distance. "Your husband briefed me on the situation," Marcus said. "The threats are being taken seriously by local law enforcement, but until the individual making them is apprehended, I'll be with you whenever you leave the house. I'll try to be as unobtrusive as possible." "And Emma?" Catherine asked, thinking of her daughter who was upstairs getting ready for school. "I'll handle drop-off and pick-up at Westwood Academy. I've already coordinated with their security office. Emma won't even notice I'm there most of the time." But Emma did notice. When Catherine introduced them, her daughter looked at Marcus with the open curiosity of a 10-year-old who wasn't yet trained to hide her thoughts. "Are you like a secret agent?" Emma asked, her eyes wide. Marcus smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer. "More like a very careful driver who's really good at keeping people safe." "Do you have a gun?" "Emma," Catherine said quickly, but Marcus just laughed. "I do, but it's only for emergencies." "My job is to make sure there are no emergencies." Emma seemed satisfied with this answer. Within a week, she was chattering away to Marcus during their drives to school, telling him about her classes and her friends, and the science project she was working on. Marcus listened with patient attention that Catherine recognized. Because she saw the same quality in Alexander whenever he managed to be present with their daughter, except Marcus was always present. He was professional, courteous, invisible when needed, present when required. He drove Catherine to her charity meetings, standing by the door during luncheons and galas, always scanning the room with those alert hazel eyes. He accompanied Emma to school, waiting in the parking lot during the day in case early pickup was needed. He stayed 3 steps behind at social events, a quiet shadow that Catherine barely noticed after the first week. Alexander barely noticed him at all. Marcus Kane was just another employee to Alexander, another line item in the security budget, another detail handled by David Chen that Alexander didn't need to think about. But Catherine noticed. She noticed how Marcus opened doors without being asked, how he had learned Emma's schedule within days and always had her favorite granola bars ready in the car after school, how he actually listened when she talked during their drives, asking follow-up questions that proved he was paying attention instead of just filling silence. She noticed how he smiled at her jokes, real smiles that reached his eyes, how his gaze would linger on her face just a fraction too long when she said something particularly clever or funny, how the air in the car felt charged sometimes, as if there was a current running between them that neither acknowledged but both felt. And she noticed, with growing awareness that frightened and thrilled her in equal measure, how alive she felt when Marcus was near, how she caught herself choosing outfits with more care on mornings when she knew she would see him, how she looked forward to their drives together, how she felt seen and heard and valued in a way that Alexander hadn't made her feel in years. David Chen sat in the FBI field office, his hands clasped tightly on the table. Across from him, Special Agent Sarah Martinez reviewed the documents he'd brought with increasing concern. "How long have you known?" Martinez asked, her voice sharp. 48 hours, Chen replied. "I wanted to be absolutely certain before bringing this to you. If I was wrong, I'd be destroying an innocent man's career and reputation." Martinez looked at the surveillance photos spread across the table. Marcus Kane and Catherine Hayes. The timestamps told the story clearly. The intimacy was obvious. "This affair could be genuine," Martinez said carefully. "Inappropriate, yes, but not necessarily criminal." "Look at page 12, Chen said quietly. Martinez flipped through the file. Her expression changed as she read. The real Marcus Kane had died 3 years ago in a car accident in Nevada. The man using his identity had military training, yes, but not American military. Analysis of his movement patterns, his fighting stance captured on security footage, his weapon handling during a training exercise, all pointed to foreign special forces training. Specifically, Eastern European. You think he's FSB? Martinez asked, referring to Russia's Federal Security Service. Or connected to organized crime with state protection, Chen replied. Hayes Industries just secured a $3 billion defense contract. They're developing next-generation encryption technology for the Pentagon. If someone wanted access to that, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Martinez picked up her phone. I'm bringing in our counterintelligence division. This is bigger than local jurisdiction. Within 2 hours, the FBI had assembled a task force. Within 4 hours, they had surveillance on Marcus Kane that he had no idea existed. Within 6 hours, they had tapped his communications and identified encrypted messages to 3 different overseas numbers. The operation was massive and delicate. If Kane realized he was compromised, he would vanish. Worse, if his handlers learned the FBI was onto them, they might activate whatever endgame they had planned. The FBI made a decision. Keep Alexander Hayes in the dark for now. Use Catherine's affair as leverage. And most importantly, let Kane think he was still in control. Meanwhile, Catherine Hayes was spiraling. She had tried to end things with Marcus twice. Both times, he had convinced her to continue. His words were perfect. His touch was addictive. His attention filled the void Alexander had left in her heart, but the guilt was consuming her. Every time she looked at Emma, she felt sick. Every time Alexander said, "I love you," before boarding another flight, she wanted to scream the truth. She was standing in her closet, trying to choose something for Alexander's company anniversary gala that evening, when her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "We need to talk. Today. It's urgent." Her heart dropped. Those were the words she'd been dreading. He was going to end it. Or worse, confess his feelings and force her to make a real choice. She texted back, "Guest house. 20 minutes. She told the household staff she was taking a walk. She told herself this would be the last time. She told herself many lies as she walked across the perfectly manicured lawn to the guest house where her marriage had shattered. Marcus was already there, pacing. He looked different, tense, almost frightened. "What's wrong?" Catherine asked. And part of her hoped he would say he was leaving, that this had been a mistake, that they could both go back to their separate lives. "I need to tell you something," Marcus said. "I should have told you from the beginning, but I couldn't risk losing you." Catherine's blood went cold. "Tell me what?" "My name isn't really Marcus Kane." The words hung in the air like smoke. Catherine stared at him, not understanding. "What?" "My real name is Alexei Volkov. I'm from Minsk. I came to the United States 5 years ago." He reached for her hand, but she jerked away. "You've been lying to me? About your name? About everything?" "Not about my feelings," he said desperately. "Never about that. Catherine, I love you. That's real. Everything between us is real. But I need to tell you the truth before—" The door burst open. FBI agents flooded into the guest house with weapons drawn. Catherine screamed. Marcus's hands went up instinctively. "Alexei Volkov, you're under arrest for identity theft, conspiracy to commit espionage, and unlawful entry into the United States," Agent Martinez announced. "You have the right to remain silent." "Wait!" Catherine shouted. "There's been a mistake. He's just Mrs. Hayes," Martinez said firmly. "Please step aside. We need to secure the suspect." Catherine's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the sofa as agents handcuffed Marcus, no, Alexei, and led him away. He looked back at her once, and Catherine saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Not love. Not regret, fear. Special Agent Martinez sat down across from Catherine, who was shaking violently. "Mrs. Hayes, I know this is shocking, but I need you to listen carefully. Your husband is on his way home. We've already contacted him. He knows about the affair. He knows about Alexei Volkov's real identity, and he knows that you may be in danger." "Danger?" Catherine whispered. "I don't understand." "He said he loved me. He's an intelligence operative, Mrs. Hayes. We believe he was sent to infiltrate your family to gain access to your husband's company. Hayes Industries is developing classified technology. Alexei Volkov's job was to get close to someone with access to your husband's private communications and schedules." The words didn't make sense. "Couldn't make sense? The affair?" Catherine said slowly. That was his mission?" Martinez's silence was answer enough. Catherine bent forward, her hands covering her face, and sobbed. Not just for the affair, not just for the lies, but for how completely she had been used. How thoroughly she had destroyed her marriage for a man who had never loved her at all. 20 minutes later, Alexander arrived. Catherine heard his car in the driveway and felt her entire body go numb. She couldn't face him. Couldn't explain. Couldn't even look at him. He walked into the guest house, and Catherine forced herself to meet his eyes. She expected anger, rage, the cold dismissal that would end their marriage in a single sentence. Instead, Alexander Hayes crossed the room and pulled his wife into his arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "God, Catherine, I'm so sorry. This is my fault, all of it. I left you alone. I made you feel invisible. I let work consume me until there was nothing left for you." Catherine sobbed harder, her hands gripping his shirt. "I destroyed everything," she choked out. "I betrayed you. I betrayed Emma. He used you," Alexander said firmly. "He knew you were lonely. He knew I was never here. He exploited that. This was calculated, Catherine. This was his job. But I let him," she whispered. "I made the choice. I let him—" "I know." Alexander's voice broke. "I know, and we will deal with that. Together. But right now we need to keep you and Emma safe." "Because Agent Martinez says this isn't over." Catherine pulled back, wiping her eyes. "What do you mean?" Agent Martinez stepped forward. "Alexei Volkov isn't talking, not yet. But we've intercepted communications suggesting that the people who sent him have a backup plan. They know we arrested him. And they're activating their contingency. What kind of contingency? Alexander asked, his arm tightening around Catherine. Martinez hesitated. Then, we believe they're planning to kidnap Emma. The Hayes mansion became a fortress within hours. FBI agents positioned at every entrance. Surveillance upgraded to military-grade equipment with cameras covering every angle. Emma's school was notified. She would be homeschooled until further notice, with an FBI-approved tutor who had top security clearance. The transformation was complete and overwhelming. Their home, which had always been a sanctuary despite its problems, now felt like a prison. Armed agents patrolled the grounds. Motion sensors covered the perimeter. Every window had reinforced locks. Every door required security clearance to open. Emma, 10 years old and perceptive beyond her years, knew something was terribly wrong. She had woken up that morning to find her home filled with strangers wearing FBI jackets. Her mother's eyes were red from crying. Her father looked like he hadn't slept. And Marcus, who had been her friend and protector for months, was simply gone. No explanation. No goodbye, just gone. Catherine found Emma sitting on her bed that evening, still in the clothes she had worn all day, staring at the wall with the blank expression children get when their world stops making sense. "Sweetie," Catherine said softly, sitting beside her daughter. "I know today has been scary and confusing." Emma didn't look at her. "Where's Marcus?" Catherine felt her throat close. How did you explain to your child that the man who had made her laugh, who had played chess with her during traffic jams, who had taught her card tricks and let her pick the music during their drives, was a foreign operative who had been using them all as part of an espionage operation? How did you explain that her mother had fallen in love with that man? That she had betrayed her father? That nothing in their lives was what it had seemed to be? "Marcus had to go away," Catherine said carefully, each word feeling inadequate. "He won't be coming back." "Did something happen to him?" Emma's voice was small, frightened. She thought Marcus might be dead. "No, he's okay. But he had to leave. He did something bad. And he can't be around us anymore." Emma finally looked at her mother, and Catherine saw tears tracking down her daughter's face. "What did he do?" Catherine's eyes filled with matching tears. "He lied to us. About who he was. About why he was here. He wasn't really Marcus Kane. That wasn't even his real name." Emma processed this information with the serious logic of childhood, trying to make sense of adult complications. Then she asked the question Catherine had been dreading. "Did you love him?" Catherine's breath caught. Children saw everything. They noticed when their parents smiled differently at certain people. They picked up on charged silences and meaningful glances. Emma had been in that car for months, watching her mother come alive in Marcus's presence in ways she hadn't seen in years. "I thought I did," Catherine whispered, the admission costing her everything. "But I was wrong. Very, very wrong." Emma was silent for a long moment, absorbing this. Then, with the devastating honesty only children possess, "Does Daddy know?" "Yes, Daddy knows. Is he mad at you?" Catherine thought about how to answer that. Alexander had every right to be furious. She had betrayed him in the most fundamental way. She had fallen in love with another man. She had destroyed their marriage vows. "He should be," Catherine said honestly. "I hurt him very badly." Emma considered this, her young mind working through the implications. "But does he still love you?" Catherine thought of Alexander, who had walked into that guest house expecting to find his wife broken and ashamed, who had every right to walk away, to demand divorce, to let her drown in the consequences of her choices. Instead, he had crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. He had held her while she fell apart. He had said, "We will deal with this together," instead of abandoning her. "Yes," Catherine said softly, fresh tears streaming down her face. "He still loves me." "I don't know why, but he does." Emma nodded slowly, processing this with the seriousness of someone far older than 10. Then she said something that broke Catherine's heart, even as it gave her hope. "Okay, then we'll be okay. If only it were that simple. But Emma wasn't okay." Catherine could see it in the days that followed. Her daughter became quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped eating with her usual appetite. She had nightmares that woke her screaming. She would find Catherine or Alexander in the middle of the night, needing reassurance that they were really there, that they were safe, that this nightmare would end. "What if the bad people come for me?" Emma whispered one night, crawling into bed between her parents at 3 in the morning. "What if they hurt you because of me?" Alexander pulled his daughter close, and Catherine saw tears in his eyes, tears she hadn't seen since the day Emma was born. "Nothing is going to happen to you, baby. I promise. I won't let anyone hurt you," but promises felt hollow now. Alexander had promised to always put his family first, and he had broken that promise for years. Catherine had promised to forsake all others, and she had shattered that vow in the guest house by the pool. How could they promise Emma safety when they had proven so completely that their promises meant nothing? In the FBI command center set up in Alexander's home office, Agent Martinez was coordinating with Counterintelligence Division in Washington, D.C. The operation had expanded rapidly once they understood the full scope of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just one rogue operative. It was a sophisticated network with connections spanning 3 continents. Alexei Volkov had finally started talking. But what he was saying made everything more complicated rather than simpler. "He claims he was working alone," Martinez told Alexander and David Chen during a late-night briefing. The 3 of them were gathered around Alexander's desk, surrounded by documents and surveillance, photos and encrypted communications that painted a picture of conspiracy far beyond anything they had initially imagined. "Says he was hired by a private intelligence firm for industrial espionage," Martinez continued, her voice carrying skepticism that was obvious even to Alexander, who knew nothing about interrogation techniques. "No foreign government involvement. No kidnapping plan. Just corporate espionage gone wrong. Do you believe him?" Alexander asked, though he already knew the answer from Martinez's expression. Not for a second. "His story has holes you could drive a truck through. The encrypted communications we intercepted don't match a simple corporate espionage operation. Someone sent him here with a larger objective, and they have resources that suggest state sponsorship or, at minimum, organized crime with significant state protection." "Then why is he protecting them?" David Chen asked. "If he's looking at decades in federal prison anyway, why not cooperate fully?" Martinez leaned back in her chair, her face grim. "Because he's more afraid of his handlers than he is of American prison. Which tells us exactly how dangerous these people are. Alexei knows what they do to operatives who cooperate with authorities. He's seen it happen. He'd rather spend his life in solitary confinement than risk whatever they would do to him if he gave us everything." Alexander felt cold fear settle in his stomach. "So we're dealing with people who can reach someone in federal custody?" "We're taking precautions," Martinez assured him. "Alexei is in a secure facility with protection. But yes, these people have resources and reach that concern us." The break in the case came from an unexpected source at an unexpected time. It was just past 7 in the evening. Catherine was in Emma's room, reading to her from one of the Harry Potter books they had been working through together. Emma was curled against her mother's side, finally relaxed enough to focus on the story instead of the fear that had consumed her for days. Catherine's phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost ignored it. She had been instructed by Agent Martinez to report any unknown calls immediately, to never answer them herself. But something made her hesitate. Some instinct she couldn't name. She glanced at the FBI agent stationed just outside Emma's door, a young woman named Rodriguez who had been kind to Emma, who had showed her card tricks and taught her a clapping game to pass the time. Catherine made a decision. She answered the call. "Catherine Hayes?" A woman's voice, heavily accented, Eastern European. The accent sounded similar to the way Alexei had spoken during the brief moments before his arrest when his careful American pronunciation had slipped. Catherine's blood went cold. She stood up carefully, stepping away from Emma. "Who is this?" "A friend of Alexei Volkov. He asked me to give you a message before your FBI arrested him. He wanted you to know the truth." Catherine's hand was shaking. She could see Agent Rodriguez noticing something was wrong, starting to move toward her. Catherine held up one hand, signaling her to wait. "What truth?" The woman laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It carried no humor, only bitter amusement at Catherine's naivety. "Has the FBI told you why Alexei came to your family? What his mission really was?" He was sent to spy on my husband's company, Catherine said, her voice steadier than she felt. To steal encryption technology. Is that what they told you? The woman's voice carried mock surprise. How simplistic. No, Mrs. Hayes, Alexei wasn't sent to steal technology. Anyone can hack a computer given enough time and resources. The technology itself was never the primary objective. Catherine's heart was pounding. Then what? Alexei was sent to evaluate you, Catherine. To determine if you could be turned, if you could be recruited. If your husband's neglect and your obvious loneliness had made you bitter enough to betray him. Catherine felt the room spin. She sat down hard on Emma's bed, grateful her daughter was absorbed in her book and not paying attention to this conversation. That's not... Catherine started. But the woman cut her off. The affair was a test, she said, her voice almost clinical now, as if describing a laboratory experiment. To measure your loyalty, to see if you were corruptible. Alexei was supposed to seduce you, assess your moral boundaries, evaluate how much money or security or emotional manipulation it would take to turn you into an asset. Catherine couldn't breathe. Every moment with Marcus, with Alexei, was replaying in her mind with sickening new context. Every touch, every confession of feelings, every whispered promise, all of it had been calculated. All of it had been a test she had failed spectacularly. If you proved useful, the woman continued mercilessly, the real operation would begin. We would offer you money, security, a new life with Alexei somewhere beautiful and far away, all in exchange for access to your husband's encryption technology, his passwords, his schedule, his vulnerabilities. I would never, Catherine whispered, but the protest sounded weak even to her own ears. She had already betrayed Alexander in every way that mattered. How could she claim moral high ground about stealing technology when she had already stolen his trust, his love, his belief that their marriage meant something? Alexei didn't think you would either, the woman said, and now her voice carried something different. Something almost like respect. He told his handlers you were unsuitable for recruitment. Too moral, too loyal despite your unhappiness. Too genuinely good despite being married to a man who treated you like a housekeeper rather than a wife. He recommended aborting the operation entirely. Catherine's mind reeled. Then why did he continue? Because he fell in love with you, the woman said softly, and Catherine heard genuine emotion in her voice for the first time. Really in love, not as part of his mission, but despite it, against every rule we operate under, against every training protocol, against his own survival instincts. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face. I don't understand. Alexei stopped reporting to his handlers 3 weeks before the FBI arrested him. He stopped following the mission parameters. He started planning ways to extract you and Emma, to get you both out before the operation escalated to its next phase. He was trying to save you, Catherine, and that's when his handlers realized he had been compromised. That's when they decided to activate the contingency. If this is true, Catherine said slowly, her voice shaking, why are you telling me? Why do I need to know any of this? There was a pause. Then, because Alexei asked me to warn you if anything happened to him. He wanted you to know that the contingency plan isn't what the FBI thinks. They're preparing for a kidnapping that will never come. Catherine's heart stopped. What do you mean? They're not planning to kidnap your daughter, Catherine. That's misdirection, a false trail to keep the FBI watching the wrong target while the real operation proceeds. Then what are they planning? Catherine could barely form the words. The woman's next sentence destroyed what was left of Catherine's world. They're planning to assassinate your husband tomorrow night at his company's anniversary gala. And they're going to frame you for his murder. Catherine stood frozen for 3 seconds. Then she ran. The FBI agent outside Emma's door jumped up. Mrs. Hayes, get Agent Martinez! Catherine gasped. Now, someone just called me. Alexei's people. They're planning to kill my husband. Tomorrow night. At the gala. Within minutes, the command center erupted into controlled chaos. Martinez had the call traced. Burner phone, signal bounced through 6 countries, untraceable. She had Alexei Volkov brought from federal detention for emergency interrogation. When confronted with what the woman had told Catherine, Volkov's facade finally cracked. They'll kill her too, he said, his voice breaking. After they kill Alexander, they'll kill Catherine and make it look like suicide. The guilt of murdering her husband. They'll make Emma an orphan. Take everything. Why? Alexander demanded, standing in the interrogation room despite FBI protocols. Why my family? Why this elaborate plan? Volkov looked at him with something like pity. Because your company's encryption technology is about to make certain criminal organizations and corrupt governments obsolete. They can't hack it, can't break it, can't steal it. So they need to take control of Hayes Industries directly. With you dead and Catherine framed, Emma inherits everything as a minor, and the executor of her estate. He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. David Chen, Alexander whispered. The revelation hit like a physical blow. David Chen, his head of security for 8 years. The man he trusted with his family's safety. The man who had discovered Alexei's fake identity and brought it to the FBI. Agent Martinez was already moving. Where is Chen now? He said he was checking the perimeter, an agent reported. Then realizing, oh God, he's with Emma. The mansion had multiple panic rooms, but Emma's bedroom wasn't far from one. The FBI agents rushed upstairs, weapons drawn. They found Emma's room empty. The window open. And a note on her bed in David Chen's handwriting, if you want the girl alive, Alexander Hayes will attend the gala tomorrow as planned. He will announce his retirement and name me as his successor. Hayes Industries will be transferred to a trust that I control. If you deviate from these instructions in any way, Emma dies. If FBI tries to find us, Emma dies. You have 18 hours. Catherine collapsed. Alexander caught her. We'll find her, Martinez said, but her voice was tight. No. Alexander's voice was steel. I know David, he's not improvising. This was always the plan. The FBI won't find her in time. Then what do you suggest? Martinez demanded. Alexander looked at Alexei Volkov, who had been responsible for so much of this nightmare, who had seduced his wife, who had brought these people into their lives. You said you fell in love with Catherine, Alexander said. Was that true? Volkov met his eyes. Yes. Do you know where Chen would take Emma? I know where they planned the contingency site. A warehouse by the harbor. If I'm right about the timeline, get him a tactical vest, Alexander said to Martinez. He's coming with us. Absolutely not, Martinez protested. He's a foreign operative. We can't. He knows the people, the layout, the protocols. And he's the only one Chen won't expect to be working with us. Alexander's voice left no room for argument. Emma is my daughter. I will get her back, with or without FBI approval. Martinez looked at Catherine, who had stood up, her face set with determination. I'm coming too, Catherine said. Mrs. Hayes, she's my daughter. I'm coming. The warehouse was exactly where Alexei said it would be, abandoned for years, officially. But fresh tire tracks in the mud told a different story. Deep grooves suggesting heavy vehicles had been here recently. Multiple sets of footprints leading to and from the rusted metal door. FBI tactical teams surrounded the building in the pre-dawn darkness. Snipers positioned on adjacent rooftops, their infrared scopes scanning for heat signatures. Negotiators on standby with communication equipment. Armored vehicles blocking every possible exit route. The entire operation had been mobilized in under 2 hours, an impressive feat that spoke to how seriously the FBI was taking this threat. But everyone knew that hostage situations with professionals rarely ended peacefully. Statistics weren't encouraging. When trained operatives took hostages, they typically had exit strategies that involved casualties. David Chen had been Alexander's head of security for 8 years. He knew how the FBI operated. He would have planned for this. Alexander, Catherine, and Alexei wore tactical vests and communications equipment. Martinez had fought their inclusion until Alexander made it clear he was going in with or without FBI support. Better to have some control over the situation than watch him get himself killed trying to rescue his daughter alone. Chen has at least 4 men inside. Alexei briefed them in the command vehicle parked 3 blocks away. He was handcuffed, but Martinez had agreed to remove them for the operation. If this went sideways, they needed him mobile. All ex-military. All ruthless. Former contractors who got burned by their governments and now work for whoever pays highest. They're not ideologues. They're mercenaries. That makes them both more predictable and more dangerous. Predictable how? Alexander asked, his voice tight with controlled fear. Every moment they spent planning was another moment Emma was in danger. They care about money, not causes. They'll fight hard because they're being paid to, but they won't die for this job if they see better odds elsewhere. We can use that. And more dangerous how? Catherine asked, her hand gripping Alexander's so tightly her knuckles were white. Alexei met her eyes, and Catherine saw genuine regret there. Because they won't hesitate to kill Emma if they think it serves their objective. She's an asset to them only as long as she's useful. The moment she becomes a liability, they'll eliminate her without conscience. Catherine felt her knees weaken. Alexander's arm went around her waist, holding her up. Emma will be in the northeast corner, Alexei continued, pointing to a tactical map Martinez had spread across the hood of the vehicle. Away from windows, away from the main door. Probably restrained, but not harmed. Yet, they need her alive and conscious to maintain leverage. Chen is smart enough to know that if she's injured or drugged, you lose motivation to cooperate. What's the play? Alexander asked, though part of him didn't want to hear the answer. Every option they had discussed involved unacceptable risk. Chen expects the FBI to raid, Alexei said. He's positioned his men to repel a tactical assault. He has weapons, body armor, and probably explosives rigged to go off if they're breached from unexpected angles. He expects violence. He's prepared for violence. And we give him what he doesn't expect, Martinez finished, though her expression showed she hated this plan as much as Alexander did. Negotiation, capitulation. We make him think he's won. Alexander looked at the warehouse in the distance, barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere inside that building, his 10-year-old daughter was terrified and alone, held hostage by men who viewed her as nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded. He thought about Emma as a baby, so small and perfect, fitting in the crook of his arm. He thought about her first steps, taken while he was away at a business conference, captured on video by Catherine. He thought about her first day of school, which he had missed because of an emergency board meeting. He thought about all the moments he had sacrificed for his company, for his career, for his ambition, and he knew with absolute clarity that none of it mattered. Not the money, not the success, not the empire he had built. If Emma died in that warehouse, everything he had worked for would be ashes, meaningless, empty. What do you need from me? Alexander asked, his voice steady despite the fear threatening to consume him. Martinez looked at him with something approaching respect. Walk in alone, unarmed. Offer Chen exactly what he wants. Make him believe you're capitulating. Keep him talking long enough for us to get Emma out. And if he doesn't believe me, if he sees through it, then we go to Plan B, Martinez said grimly. Tactical assault. But that's a last resort. Statistically, hostage survival rates drop to under 40% once shooting starts. Catherine made a sound like a wounded animal. Alexander pulled her closer. I'll make him believe me, Alexander said. Whatever it takes. The plan was risky, possibly suicidal, but it was the only option that didn't end with Emma caught in crossfire. Her small body torn apart by bullets meant for adults who had made terrible choices she had nothing to do with. Alexander Hayes, wearing no vest, carrying no weapon, walked through the front door of the warehouse alone. The door was unlocked. It swung open with a horror movie creak that would have been almost funny in any other context. Alexander stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. Emergency lights provided dim illumination, casting everything in sickly green. David! He called out. His voice echoed in the cavernous space, bouncing off metal walls and concrete floors. It's just me. No weapons, no FBI, just a father who wants his daughter back. Let's talk. For a long moment, nothing happened. Alexander stood in the doorway, feeling exposed and vulnerable. He knew FBI snipers were watching through infrared scopes. He knew tactical teams were positioned at every entrance. He knew that if Chen gave the word, his men would execute Emma before the FBI could reach her. He also knew that this was his fault, all of it. If he had been present in his marriage, if he had paid attention to Catherine instead of treating her like house staff, if he had valued his family as much as his company, none of this would have happened. Then lights flickered on, flooding the warehouse with harsh fluorescent brightness that made Alexander squint. And there, in the center of the massive empty space, Standing on a platform that had probably once been used for machinery, was David Chen, holding Emma. Alexander's breath caught. Emma looked small and frightened, her eyes red from crying. Her clothes were rumpled, her hair messy, but she wasn't visibly injured. When she saw her father, her face transformed with hope and relief. "Daddy!" She started to shout, but Chen's hand covered her mouth gently but firmly. "Close enough," Chen said, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. "I'm glad you came alone, Alexander. I was worried you might do something foolish like bring an assault team. FBI is outside," Alexander admitted, keeping his voice calm and reasonable. "But I came to negotiate. You know me, David, I'm a businessman. I solve problems through deals, not violence. You want control of my company. I want my daughter. Surely we can find common ground," Chen laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Common ground? You think this is a contract negotiation? That we can find terms acceptable to both parties? I think you're a smart man who's been backed into a corner," Alexander said carefully. "I think your employers have put you in an impossible position. I think you're looking for a way out that doesn't end with you dead or in prison. Am I wrong?" Chen's expression flickered with something, surprise maybe, or grudging respect. "You always did see 10 moves ahead, Alexander. It's why I enjoyed working for you. Most CEOs are idiots who stumbled into success through luck or inheritance. But you built something real. You earned your position." "Then you know I'm serious about finding a solution," Alexander said. "You've been my head of security for 8 years. In some ways, you know me better than my own wife. You know I don't make empty promises. You know when I offer a deal, I honor it." "And what deal are you offering?" Chen asked, his grip on Emma tightening slightly. Not enough to hurt her, but enough to remind Alexander who held all the cards. Immunity. Witness protection. The FBI wants the people you're working for, not you. They want the network, the handlers, the money trail. Give them everything you know. Testify, and walk away from this alive and free. And you disappear with billions of dollars of technology and classified contracts? Chen shook his head. "We both know that can't happen. The FBI is lying to you if they told you otherwise." "Or," Alexander said, taking a risk, "you disappear, but not as David Chen. That man dies tonight. New identity, new life. Protection from the people who would kill you for cooperating. You're smart enough to know your handlers have already written you off. The moment I filed those FBI reports, you became a liability." "You think I don't know that?" Chen's voice rose with sudden anger. "You think I haven't figured out that I'm expendable? That they're planning to eliminate me whether this operation succeeds or fails? Then why protect them?" Alexander asked. "Why die for people who have already decided you're worthless?" Before Chen could answer, a new voice cut through the tension. "Because he's more afraid of what they'll do to him if he talks than what American authorities will do if he doesn't," Alexei Volkov said, stepping from the shadows where he had been positioned by Martinez. Chen's gun came up immediately, trained on Alexei. "You, how—" "I made the same deal you're being offered," Alexei said calmly, his hands visible and empty. "Immunity in exchange for everything I know about the organization, including you, including the contingency protocols, including the fact that they always kill their operatives who get compromised. You're lying." But Chen's voice carried less certainty now. "Am I? Check your phone, David. Those offshore accounts they promised you, the ones in Grand Cayman and Switzerland and Singapore. Check them right now." Chen's hand shook slightly as he pulled out his phone with his free hand, still gripping Emma with the other. His face went from flushed anger to pale shock as he scrolled through what Alexander assumed were banking notifications. No, this can't—" Chen's voice broke. "Already frozen," Alexei confirmed. "The FBI worked with international banking authorities the moment I gave them the account numbers. Every dollar they promised you is gone. The exit strategy they provided? Also burned. The safe houses in Buenos Aires and Bangkok and Berlin? All compromised. You have nowhere to run even if you escape this warehouse." Chen looked like a man watching his world collapse in real time. "They said, they promised, they lied," Alexei said simply. "Just like they lied to me. Just like they lie to every operative they use. We're disposable tools to them, David. Nothing more. Check your comms." Martinez's voice came through, broadcast into the warehouse through speakers the FBI had positioned. Your backup team. The 4 men you think are securing your perimeter. Try to raise them. Chen touched his earpiece, his free hand trembling now. Sierra 1, report. Sierra 2, status check. Sierra 3, Sierra 4. Anyone respond? Silence. We got them 20 minutes ago, Martinez continued. All 4 secured without shots fired. You're alone, David. Your employer has abandoned you. Your team is in custody. Your money is frozen. Your escape routes are burned. You have 1 asset left, Emma Hayes. And she's only valuable if you're willing to kill a 10-year-old girl in cold blood. Alexander saw the moment David Chen realized he had lost. The calculation happening behind his eyes. The weighing of impossible options. The recognition that every path forward led to destruction. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Alexander genuinely didn't know what Chen would do. The man had been trained to eliminate threats. He had killed before. Alexander had never asked, but he had suspected. He was cornered, desperate, and holding a gun with a child in his arms. Then Catherine Hayes stepped forward, emerging from the shadows where she had been positioned against everyone's advice. David, she said softly, and her voice carried clearly in the silent warehouse. Please. Chen looked at her, and Alexander saw something change in his expression. Catherine continued, taking slow steps forward with her hands visible and empty. I know what it's like to be used, Catherine said, her voice breaking. To believe someone cares about you and discover it was all manipulation. To realize you destroyed everything that mattered for people who saw you as nothing more than a tool. Mrs. Hayes, stay back, Chen said, but there was no force behind the command. Emma has nothing to do with the choices we made, Catherine continued, tears streaming down her face now. She's 10 years old. She likes Harry Potter and science projects and playing chess. She wants to be a marine biologist someday. She still believes the world is fundamentally good, because nobody has taught her otherwise yet. Catherine was close enough now that Chen could have shot her easily, but he didn't. Please, Catherine whispered. Whatever you're planning, whatever you think you need to do, please don't make my daughter pay for the choices adults made. Don't let her death be what you're remembered for. You're better than that. I've seen you with Emma. You liked her. You taught her card tricks. You made her laugh. Something in Catherine's voice, the raw pain, the absolute vulnerability, the mother's desperate love, broke through the last of Chen's training and defenses. His shoulders slumped. The gun lowered. His grip on Emma loosened. I didn't want it to go this far, he said quietly, and he suddenly looked much older than his 42 years. It was supposed to be simple. Get the encryption keys. Disappear with enough money to never worry again. But they kept changing the plan, adding complications. And then he looked at Alexander, you kept treating me like family, trusting me with your most valuable secrets. It would have been easier if you'd been the cold bastard everyone thinks you are. I know, Alexander said, taking a careful step forward. I'm sorry you were put in this position, but it's not too late to end this differently than they planned. Let Emma go, Catherine said, her voice still gentle despite the tears. Whatever happens next, let my daughter go. Please. David Chen looked down at Emma, who was crying silently, her small body shaking with fear and exhaustion. He saw in her face everything he had lost. Innocence, hope, the belief that adults would protect rather than harm her. He released her. Emma ran. Not to her father or mother, but to the first person she saw, which happened to be Alexei. She threw her arms around him, sobbing, and Alexei caught her awkwardly, his expression stricken with guilt and sorrow. Then Alexander was there, sweeping Emma up into his arms, holding her so tightly she gasped. Catherine rushed over, and for a moment the Hayes family held each other while FBI agents flooded into the warehouse. Weapons trained on David Chen, who stood with his hands raised in surrender. I'm sorry, Chen said, looking at Alexander as agents moved to secure him. I'm truly sorry. You were a good boss. You didn't deserve this. None of us deserve this, Alexander replied quietly. But it's over now. David Chen was arrested without further resistance. He didn't fight, didn't try to escape, just allowed himself to be handcuffed and led away, looking like a man who had already accepted his fate. Alexei Volkov was taken into federal custody, his cooperation ensuring he would avoid the worst charges. As they led him past the Hayes family, he stopped for a moment, looking at Catherine with an expression of profound regret. "I meant it," he said quietly. "What I felt for you, that was real." Catherine looked at him with tears still streaming down her face. "I know, but it doesn't change anything." "I know," Alexei replied. "Take care of them. They deserve better than what we gave them." Then he was gone, disappearing into the custody of federal marshals, who would transport him to a secure facility where he would begin the long process of dismantling the network that had nearly destroyed the Hayes family. Alexander carried Emma to the waiting ambulance, paramedics checking her vitals and looking for injuries. She was physically unharmed, just exhausted and traumatized. They recommended bringing her to the hospital for observation, but Emma refused to let go of her father. "I want to go home," she sobbed. "Please, Daddy, I just want to go home." "Okay, baby," Alexander whispered, holding her close. "Okay, we'll go home." Catherine climbed into the FBI vehicle with them, never letting go of Emma's hand. As they drove away from the warehouse where their nightmare had nearly ended in tragedy, she looked at Alexander across their daughter's sleeping form. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For everything. For all of it?" "I know," Alexander replied. "I'm sorry, too. I drove you to him. I was so focused on building something that I forgot to maintain what I already had." "That doesn't excuse what I did." "No," Alexander agreed. "It doesn't. But maybe we can figure out how to forgive each other anyway. If not for us, then for her." He looked down at Emma, who had finally fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion, her face tear-stained but peaceful. Catherine followed his gaze and felt her heart break and mend simultaneously. "Yes," she said softly, "for her." 3 months after the warehouse, life had settled into something that resembled normal but felt entirely different. The Hayes family was testifying before a closed session of Congress about security vulnerabilities in the defense contractor vetting process. They sat together at a long table, Alexander in a suit that hung slightly looser than it used to, Catherine with her hair pulled back severely, Emma between them looking small and serious in the dress her mother had chosen. Senator Patricia Williams led the questioning, her voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Hayes, can you explain how David Chen was able to maintain his position as your head of security for 8 years without anyone discovering his true allegiances?" Alexander felt the weight of that question. "Senator, the honest answer is that I trusted him completely. I never questioned his background because he came highly recommended. I never audited his activities because he had proven himself competent repeatedly. I took his loyalty for granted because it never occurred to me that someone I considered family would betray us. And that's the lesson here," Senator Williams said. "Not just for defense contractors, but for anyone dealing with classified information. Trust must be verified. Backgrounds must be continuously monitored. No one can be considered above suspicion, no matter how long they've served or how trusted they seem." Catherine was asked about how foreign operatives identify and exploit vulnerabilities in American families. She answered with painful honesty about her loneliness, about how easy it had been for Alexei to see exactly what she needed and provide it, about how married people could be targeted through emotional rather than financial means. "Mrs. Hayes, that took tremendous courage to admit publicly," Senator Williams said when Catherine finished. "Your testimony will help other families recognize when they might be vulnerable to similar exploitation." Emma was not required to testify, but she had insisted on coming. She wanted to see the adults who were supposed to protect families like hers actually doing something about it. She wanted to know that her trauma would mean something beyond her own nightmares. 6 months after the congressional testimony, Hayes Industries had implemented security protocols that became industry standard. Multi-factor authentication for all systems. Continuous background monitoring for anyone with security clearance. Psychological evaluations every 6 months to identify employees under unusual stress or facing financial difficulties that might make them vulnerable to recruitment. Other defense contractors adopted Hayes's protocols voluntarily, not wanting to face the kind of infiltration that had nearly destroyed Hayes Industries. The Department of Defense made many of these protocols mandatory for anyone working on classified projects. Alexander had stepped back from daily operations, promoting his COO, Sarah Chen, no relation to David, to CEO. He remained chairman of the board and major shareholder, but his days of 18-hour work weeks were over. He attended Emma's robotics competitions. He took Catherine on weekend trips. He was home for dinner every night unless absolutely unavoidable. The first few months were awkward. They moved through their house like strangers who happened to be married, polite and careful with each other. They didn't know how to be together anymore. Their entire relationship had been built on patterns that no longer served them. 1 year after everything fell apart, Alexander and Catherine Hayes were sitting in a marriage counselor's office for their weekly session. Dr. Rebecca Foster had been seeing them for 10 months now, guiding them through the painful process of deciding whether their marriage could be saved and, if so, what it would need to look like. "I need to ask you both something difficult," Dr. Foster said during one session. "Do you want to stay married because you genuinely believe this relationship can become healthy and fulfilling, or because you're afraid of what divorce would mean for Emma?" Catherine and Alexander looked at each other across the small space of the counseling office. It was the kind of question that demanded honesty rather than politeness. "I want to stay married," Catherine said slowly, "because I remember who we used to be. Before the success and the money and the pressure, I remember the man who wrote his own vows and promised to always put me first. I believe that man is still in there somewhere, even if he got lost for a while." "And you?" Dr. Foster asked Alexander. "I want to stay married," Alexander replied, "because I finally understand what I was destroying. For years, I thought providing for my family was the same as loving them. I thought the house and the security and the opportunities I was creating were enough. I didn't realize that Catherine needed a partner, not a provider, that Emma needed a father, not a trust fund. I was building an empire while my actual family was falling apart." "You both keep talking about the past," Dr. Foster observed. "What you used to be. What you lost. But what about the future? If you stay together, what does that marriage look like?" It was a question they returned to repeatedly over the months that followed. What did a healthy Hayes marriage look like? Not the one they had pretended to have, with its picture-perfect surface hiding rot underneath, but a real marriage built on actual communication and genuine presence and mutual respect. They learned to talk, really talk, not just exchange information about schedules and logistics. They learned to fight productively instead of avoiding conflict until resentment built to explosive levels. They learned that Catherine needed to express her needs explicitly rather than hoping Alexander would intuit them. They learned that Alexander needed to actually be present when he was home, not physically there while mentally still at the office. It was hard work, harder than anything either of them had done before. Some days they wanted to quit. Some nights they went to bed angry, despite the old advice about never sleeping on an argument. Some weeks they backslid into old patterns and had to consciously pull themselves back. But they kept trying. Agent Martinez checked in on them periodically, officially to gather additional information for ongoing prosecutions, but Catherine suspected she was also genuinely concerned about how they were managing. "We're not fixed," Alexander told her during one of these check-ins. "Maybe we never will be completely. There will always be scars. Catherine will always wonder if I'm really present or just performing presence. I will always carry guilt about driving her to someone else. But we're trying, really trying. That's all any marriage is," Martinez said. Trying. My own marriage ended in divorce after 15 years. Not because of one big betrayal, but because we stopped trying. We got comfortable and complacent and stopped doing the work. The fact that you're still doing the work after everything you went through says something. Catherine had made her own changes. She resigned from several charity boards to focus on Emma and on rebuilding her marriage, but she also returned to her first love, art curation. She had been offered a position at a small gallery that specialized in helping at-risk youth express themselves through art. The gallery didn't pay much, but it gave Catherine something that Hayes Industries galas never had, purpose that was entirely hers. She worked with teenagers who had experienced trauma, teaching them to channel pain into creativity. She helped them see that broken things could be made beautiful, that scars could become art. One of her students, a 17-year-old named Maria who had survived domestic violence, created a sculpture of a shattered vase repaired with gold. When Catherine asked her about it, Maria said, "My therapist told me about kintsugi, how Japanese artisans repair broken pottery with gold, making the cracks part of the beauty." I thought, that's what I want to be. Not perfect, but golden where I broke. Catherine cried when she heard that. She bought the sculpture for her home, placing it in the living room where she could see it every day. A reminder that breaking wasn't the end of the story, that healing was possible, that golden scars could be more beautiful than flawless surfaces. Emma was in therapy twice a week with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. The nightmares came less frequently now. The panic attacks when her parents were late picking her up from school had mostly stopped. She was laughing again, genuinely laughing, not the forced cheerfulness she had tried to maintain in the immediate aftermath of her kidnapping. But she had changed in ways that couldn't be undone. She was more serious now, more aware of how fragile safety really was. She had learned too young that adults could lie, that people she trusted could betray her, that the world was more dangerous than she had believed. "That's not necessarily bad," Dr. Mitchell told Catherine and Alexander during a joint session. "Emma has lost some innocence, yes, but she's also developing resilience and awareness that will serve her well. She's learning that bad things can happen, but don't have to define her, that families can survive terrible events if they choose to. That love is a decision you make every day, not a feeling that just happens." Emma had decided she wanted to study computer science and cybersecurity when she was older. She wanted to help protect other families from the kind of infiltration that had nearly destroyed hers. She spent hours teaching herself coding languages and security protocols, her 10-year-old mind absorbing information at a rate that astounded her teachers. "She's going to do great things," Dr. Mitchell told them. "Not despite her trauma, but partially because of it. She's found purpose in her pain. That's incredibly mature for someone her age." 2 years after the warehouse, the Hayes family took a vacation together. Just the three of them. No bodyguards beyond standard precautions. No FBI protection detail. Just a family learning to be a family again. They went to a small beach town in Oregon where nobody recognized Alexander from magazine covers or Catherine from charity galas. They rented a cottage right on the beach, weathered wood and salt air and the constant sound of waves that Emma found surprisingly comforting. They built sandcastles with Emma, elaborate structures with moats and towers and seashell decorations. They watched sunsets paint the sky in impossible colors. They cooked simple meals together in the cottage's tiny kitchen. No elaborate presentations or expensive wines, just food they made with their own hands. They talked about ordinary things. Whether the ocean was too cold for swimming, yes. What movie to watch after dinner, Emma's choice. Whether tomorrow they should drive to the nearby lighthouse or just spend another day on the beach. One evening, as they walked along the shore with Emma running ahead to chase seagulls, Alexander took Catherine's hand. The touch was tentative, asking permission rather than assuming it. Catherine squeezed back, answering. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked quietly, watching their daughter laugh as waves chased her up the sand. Catherine was silent for a moment, really considering the question. 2 years ago, if someone had asked her this, she would have said no immediately. The damage seemed too extensive, the betrayals too profound, the trust too shattered. But 2 years of work had changed things. 2 years of therapy and honest conversations and choosing each other even when it was hard. 2 years of learning that healing was possible but required active effort rather than passive hope. She watched Emma run freely, her laughter carried on the wind. She saw how Alexander's face softened when he looked at their daughter, the guilt and love and determination all mixed together. She felt the warmth of his hand in hers, solid and real. "I think we already are," she said finally. "Not perfect, but okay. And maybe that's enough." "More than enough," Alexander replied, and she heard the emotion in his voice. They stood there for a moment, Two people who had broken each other and been broken by circumstances beyond their control. Watching their daughter chase birds with the unself-conscious joy of childhood that trauma hadn't completely stolen. The sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple and deep blue. The Hayes family walked back to their cottage together, not as the people they had been 3 years ago, but as the people they had fought to become, scarred, wiser, stronger, and together. The truth that the FBI discovered, the truth that left everyone speechless, wasn't about the espionage or the conspiracy or even the affair. It was simpler, more profound, more difficult. The truth was that families break, trust shatters. Love gets tested in ways you never imagined. But sometimes, if you're willing to do the work, if you're willing to be honest and vulnerable and choose each other even when it's hard, sometimes broken things can be made whole again. Not the same, but stronger for having been broken. The Hayes family was proof of that. Alexander had learned that success meant nothing if you came home to an empty house. That providing wasn't the same as being present. That his daughter needed a father, not a bank account. That his wife needed a partner, not a provider. Catherine had learned that loneliness makes you vulnerable to people who see that vulnerability as an opportunity. That communication requires courage. That you can't expect someone to know what you need if you never tell them. That forgiveness of yourself and others is a daily choice, not a one-time decision. Emma had learned that adults make mistakes, that people aren't always who they seem, that families can survive terrible things if they choose to stay together. That love isn't the absence of problems. It's the commitment to work through them. And in a federal facility somewhere in the Midwest, Alexei Volkov was learning that redemption doesn't erase the harm you've caused, but it might give you a chance to prevent future harm. His testimony had helped dismantle a criminal network that spanned 3 continents. It wouldn't bring back the years Catherine lost to guilt and self-recrimination, but maybe it saved someone else's family from facing the same nightmare. 2 years after the warehouse, the Hayes family took a vacation together. Just the 3 of them. No bodyguards, no security detail beyond standard precautions. Just a family learning to be a family again. They went to a small beach town where nobody recognized Alexander from magazine covers or Catherine from charity galas. They built sandcastles with Emma. They watched sunsets. They talked about ordinary things. What to have for dinner, which movie to watch, whether the ocean was too cold for swimming. One evening, as they walked along the beach, Emma ran ahead, chasing seagulls and laughing. Alexander took Catherine's hand. "Are we going to be okay?" he asked quietly. Catherine watched their daughter, strong and resilient and beautiful, running fearlessly toward the waves. "I think we already are," she said. "Not perfect, but okay." "And maybe that's enough." Alexander squeezed her hand. More than enough. The sun set over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. The Hayes family walked back to their rental house together, not as the people they had been 2 years ago, but as the people they had fought to become. Scarred, wiser, stronger, and together. 5 years after everything fell apart, Catherine Hayes stood in her kitchen making coffee on a Saturday morning. Alexander was reading the newspaper at the table. Emma, now 15, was upstairs getting ready to meet friends at the mall. It was ordinary. Beautifully, preciously ordinary. The therapist they'd seen for 3 years had eventually told them they didn't need weekly sessions anymore. They had done the work. They had rebuilt trust brick by brick. They had learned to communicate, to be present, to choose each other daily. The marriage they had now didn't look like the one they'd had before everything happened. It was better, more honest, built on a foundation of actual understanding rather than assumptions and convenience. Alexander had never made partner at another firm. He didn't need to. Hayes Industries thrived under new leadership while he focused on being present for his family. He coached Emma's robotics team. He took Catherine on weekend trips. He was there for dinner every night. Catherine had returned to her first love, art curation, but now she worked with at-risk youth, teaching them to express trauma through creativity. She helped run a program that supported families going through crises. She turned her pain into purpose. Emma had grown into a remarkable young woman. She was studying computer science and planned to work in cybersecurity someday, inspired by the events that had almost destroyed her family. She wanted to protect other families from similar threats. The story could have ended differently. The betrayal could have been final. The damage could have been irreparable. But the Hayes family had made different choices. They chose honesty over hiding. They chose forgiveness over bitterness. They chose growth over stagnation. They chose each other over giving up. And in making those choices, day after day, year after year, they discovered something profound. The strongest families aren't the ones that never break. They're the ones that know how to heal. So, what did you think of Alexander and Catherine's story? Rate it from 0 to 10 in the comments. My favorite moment was when Alexander chose to hold Catherine instead of walking away. That's the kind of love that really matters. What was your favorite part? And here's the big question. If you were Alexander, would you have forgiven Catherine after discovering the affair? Or would the betrayal have been too much? Drop your thoughts below. I really want to know what you do. If this story of trust tested, families broken and rebuilt, and learning that love means choosing each other even when it's hard moved you, subscribe to Deep Stories for more emotional tales every week. Stories about people facing impossible choices, about marriages that survive betrayal, and about discovering that healing is possible even after everything falls apart. Hit that subscribe button and join our community. I'll see you in the next story.